Check, check, check. 1, 2, check, check. Can you hear? Yeah.
seen these droids, these robots that hold beer there?
Hello, everyone. We're still trickling in, so I think we'll give folks a little more time.
All right. Can folks hear me in the back? Sweet. There's some seats up front. Okay, we will go ahead and get started. How was the food? Everybody have good lunch? Sweet. Okay. So my name is Todd Hunson-Strain with Oregon Housing Community Services. I'm the production manager, and I'm joined.
Yes, I'm Angela Parada, Senior Tax Credit Programs Manager.
And today we're here to talk about the private activity bonds and LIHTC. So if you're not here for that, that's okay. You learn all the exciting things about private activity bonds and low-income housing tax credits. So anyway, so am I giving an indicator to move slides? Who's like, okay, so I'll give you a heads up. All right, so I'll do this and it'll be good. So next slide. So just here's the agenda. So we're just going to kind of provide overview of the topic and talk about some immediate responses that we're doing in results to private activity bond, and then some changes that we're looking at for the program, and review some lessons learned of last year's cycle, and also talk about insights around next year's NOFA. Next slide. So, context-wise, if folks weren't aware, they're with 4% tax credits and 9% tax credits, there's some little subtle differences that has to do with what's known as private activity bonds, and that is allocated by by the federally and administered by the state treasurer. I don't have any control of that, so if anything, you could I can give you some names of people you could write to, as Mike and Schrader indicated in the lunch session. You could you're always welcome to talk to your federal delegation about the issues that are around we're facing around private activity bond challenges. So traditionally we've up until recently, the resource has been undersubscribed. I mean, we with the agency, I think we at one point we started off with like 5 transactions, and now we're well north of close to 50, and that's all due in part to the great work that you folks are doing, and also just the amount of soft resources that is active in the state that gets paired with 4%. So we're doing a great job with with the state and getting out resources, and now we have a constraint issue. So so with that, we find ourselves in a new environment where we have to adapt, and we are shifting models from what has been typically non-competitive to a competitive format. And a lot of throughout the United States, this problem is going on in multiple states, and now we're just realizing what is a trend all across the nation. Next slide. So with that, here's some more context just around where we're at. We had prior years, we had what's called carry forward allocation, that essentially we've spent that down, and now next year going into next year, we'll essentially have zero carry forward. And so what that means is we have to live within our means of a cap that is allocated by the state treasurer's office. Next slide. So I don't know if folks in the back could see this bar graph, but it's the reality is, based on our projections, availability is exceeds demand. And this chart was developed basically in conjunction with getting input from local funders throughout the state, and also our own pipeline, and also just surveying developers throughout the state. So so with that, we knew that accepting new applications going forward, we had to stand up a process, because we would essentially have run out of bond cap quicker than we anticipated. So with that, we had to start and set up a process. Next slide. So again, changing our application process, and trying to really create a rebalance of the system to make sure that folks understand, transparently, and how we can, essentially prioritize projects going forward. Next slide. So what we did immediately, knowing last year we kind of saw a signal that in November we started to see that realistically, if we started continuing the path of just non-competitiveness, it would have a ripple effect on other transactions. So after that, we had multiple various input sessions and work groups, and I'm thankful for the folks who participated in that, and really appreciate that. It was very informative for the department to have your participation, and I see some folks in the room, so wanted to acknowledge that. And then with that, we continue to, we're continuing to move the projects forward this year that are closing closing this year. But what we started to do was craft a couple of interventions that I'll talk about in the next slides. One highlight being a one-time opportunity to choose a different, we're calling it a 9%, 4% swap. But that is one of the interventions we came up with input from stakeholders, and we also contracted with Programmatic, and so those are some things that we felt that we could at least try to decompress the PAB cap. And next slide. So, and then also knowing that this context-wise, we still need for the 4% pipeline, 4%, and all LIHTCs are governed by the qualified allocation process. So we still need we're making some updates to that. And here's a couple of highlights. Ranking applications in order of specific readiness to proceed benchmarks. And then we're trying to put in some accountability measures, just so that we don't have projects hold on to PAB without realistically having a pathway to close. Next slide. So another key here I'll just highlight is extending affordability from to 60 years. Typically, the 4% has only been a 30-year affordability term. So that is, that's a highlight. And also, making sure that our culturally responsive metrics in that application, we have multiple, for folks who have submitted applications to OHCS, we have various metrics, at the NOFA level, and now we're kind of layering that in as part of this our 4% process also. All right, next slide. So with that, we've kind of divided into two buckets. I know, definition wise, there's always a lot of interest in set-asides in the state, because Oregon geography, it's not, we have multiple geographies, so we wanted to acknowledge that, you know, there's those differences in the ability to develop. So Metro has a set aside of 65%, and balance the state, which means any other counties is 35%, and then we're going to prioritize projects that are housing authority owned projects, followed by projects that have a significant amount of local resources. Then next have OHCS resources, and then last without any projects without any additional local subsidies. And you know, just this kind of structure just was, you know, we felt, you know, in stakeholder engagement that, you know, this priority metrics would at least spread the pain equally amongst all types of projects. And you know, so that's what we came up with. Next. And then we have some tiebreakers listed here. Projects sponsored by culturally specific sponsors. Then next with highest unit dedicated to average 30% AMI and below, or extremely low income, and then also for projects with permanent supportive housing resources. And then next after that, and then I'll kick it over to Angela just to kind of talk about just kind of a review of the timeline.
Sure. Hi, Al. So that was a lot, and I want to just provide a little breathing room in terms of perhaps understanding the relationship internally between the two sources, both the 4% LIHTC and PAB. So the 4% live and are dictated through that QAP, that Qualified Allocation Plan that was referenced. And TIE is integral because traditionally our 4%, since they've been non-competitive, have been managed through our production, through our underwriting process. That will have an about face where we'll see more. I know there's a lot of people in the room I don't know, which means there's probably principally 4% deals in the room. And so I just wanted to kind of flush that out to make sure that folks understood that this is about highest and best use of the resource. And all of these updates will be outlined in the draft QAP, which will be released in the next few weeks. Please visit the tax credit page on the OHCS website to view those changes in stone, so that you can comment so we can change it. And just looking here at the timeline, it's just to try and give high level understanding of, as was suggested at lunch, the next few years will be turbulent. There will be changes. We anticipate really needing to be able to get some roots in the ground in terms of practical policy, but also to be able to pivot as we see policy manifest and who gets awarded. So November, pausing the program. We are currently in an open 4% application period. For those of you who are not, hard to know who exactly is in the room, but that window is open. It was supposed to have closed on the 25th. It's been extended to October 3rd. And that's an opportunity for everyone in the pipeline to provide us some updates about their readiness to proceed, which will be the green light moving forward. We need to know that the resources that are being reserved and allocated are good to go, that you have all of the other funding you need. Traditionally, OHCS is a last in, as is all public funds. But this is really a difference in philosophy about how we can do that now with as much competition as there is. It'll be difficult for projects to come in and be successful if they do not have their financing in place. You just won't be prioritized because you won't meet our readiness to proceed benchmarks. So we're also taking new applications at this time up and until October 3rd for 4%. Next is that window of October to November. We anticipate having a robust public comment period. We know that the changes are impacting a lot of different facets. There's a lot of players in these deals, and so we want to be able to take that feedback in. Again, please visit the website, check and sign up for our technical advisory so you get notified when that draft qualified allocation plan outlining these processes is released. In January, let me pause because I think I may have missed that we anticipate publishing a list of all of the applications in the pipeline and new applications within a 2 to 3 week window after close, so that folks have some sense of who came in. I think as we continue to evolve in this process, we'll do our very best to be as transparent as possible, and while also, crafting new policy, new procedures. And so as soon as those are formalized, we'll do our best to release them. And so in January, I really thought I updated this. It says here January, but we're hoping to get OHCS pipeline projects that requested 9% swap. So projects that are in our current pipeline that came in before the pause of the program are eligible to be considered for a 9% tax credit swap, essentially pivoting their deal to a 9%. There's approximately 9 million in credits available for this pivot. I don't have a good sense, I don't know if you do, Ty, about what it looks like currently for folks who are requesting that swap. We are anticipating that it will be wildly oversubscribed. There's still time, yes. And so just to put that out there, we're hoping to get to Housing Stability Council with those recommendations with the swaps. And again, it's not a swap about if you're funded, it's a swap about how you're funded. And so it's not to say that if you aren't awarded 9s that you won't move forward with your 4s, you will. We're just trying in an intervention to decompress that pipeline sufficiently to be able to offer additional PAB in the coming year. The hope is to also have our new Qualified Allocation Plan 2023 implemented by January. And for folks who do typically come in for our 9%, you won't see a 9% offering in January like you would normally. We're using those 24 credits in this intervention. And so if there are any remaining 9% that are 2024, because of course we forward allocate, we would offer those sometime in August or September, if for whatever reason there is remaining after the swap from the 9s or from 4s to 9s. That means that the next regular Q1 9% offering wouldn't be until 2024. Just so people are pacing work. And the hope is also that if we're successful in our swap, we would have PAB to offer in 2023. And that offering would be in April of next year. I think, is there anything else you can think of that needs to get added?
Complete the smart sheet. If you have a project, Oh, sorry about that. My bad. So again, I'll repeat, just for the listeners at home, I guess. Yeah. So complete the smart sheet, and that that's probably enough editorial comments. Okay. We'll take a couple of questions. We've got some more slides, but we'll take a couple of questions. Yes. Yeah. 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 So there's a definition that we have around material participation. So the question was, if it's a housing authority owned project, do they have to be the sole owner, or can they be the limited?
Can they be a special limited
Can they be a
partner in
special limited
partnership with the
partner?
nonprofit? Yeah.
or a managing general partner? So
No, I was thinking special.
okay, so special here, managing general. Okay.
So if I could borrow it, so the QAP outlines the definition of a housing authority project,
Okay.
and there is, they do need to have 100% role in the GP, general partner or managing partner, or controlling interests in the general partner, and at least 51% ownership with site control.
Okay. And then my second question was, did you look at maybe twinning the 4s and the 9s so that you could spread them out further?
Do you want to answer it? If we do.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at it, but the challenge with under this structure is us having the guarantee on the PAB side on the 4s, where that under this structure it would be for fairness sake, it would be a challenge to try to evaluate readiness to proceed, potentially with a 4% component that could be assigned, could take up additional PAB at a further out date. That's kind of what the challenge was.
There we go. Could you please speak to the amount of private activity bonds Oregon has as a whole? What percentage is dedicated to multifamily affordable housing versus single family versus other activities? I'm just curious what the total possible size of pie is.
Yeah. So the last year, I think the total going into next year, the total possible size is like around 400, and by or 440-ish, 440-ish. We'll call it 440-ish and some change. And then we have by statute, I think Business Oregon is another user. They have a carve out of 40, and then there's another 10 that goes to Mike D, and I don't even know. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Approximately 450 total volume cap, and not including any carry for current year, about 450, just slightly above that last year. Statutorily, and the biennial bond bill, traditionally $250 million has been allocated to Oregon housing, $40 million to Business Oregon for solid waste, manufacturing, and other private activity bond uses, with the balance to the private activity bond committee at the treasurer's office. and they get discretion in terms of how that balance or residual amount after the 250 and the 40, that's in the hands of the Private Activity Bond Committee on that. And what they have done traditionally, or at least recently, is they've allocated all of that to multifamily housing, and I anticipate that that trend will continue.
Thanks, Mike. And I just anecdotally, always good to have a good lawyer with you, just in general.
Just real quick, with the list that you're going to be sending out with every submission, are you also going to show the priority of where they fall for selection, if it's an HA project or whatnot?
Probably, yeah, we can.
I don't know that it'll.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess, yeah, we could probably look to do that, you know. Yeah, we could add that to the list.
Oh. Sorry. You want to go first? Okay. Thanks. Jill Chen with the Portland Housing Bureau. When I was looking at your PAB, QAP sort of allocation, it looked like, and following up on her question earlier, that the housing authorities have first priority, which means technically, if you have a housing authority preservation project which uses up a lot of PAB, it could become a first priority regardless of whatever else is in the pipeline. Can you just clarify that a little bit? And I have a follow-up question. I might as well ask it now. As you know, for most of the local jurisdictions, most of our monies goes out in competitive NOFAs. And these competitive NOFAs, there's no way for the project to be able to come in for for private activity bonds, because it'll take them at least a year, maybe more, to go through pre-development. So how would you advise them in terms of managing that capital stack? Because when they come in, they must be fully funded. Are you suggesting they assume a 4%? And what is the timing for them to assume that 4%? Because they wouldn't have come into your pipeline yet.
Yeah. So I will. So I'll answer the first one first. So the first question is around if a acquisition rehab project is owned by the housing authority, do they essentially become, first in line, and under this structure? Yeah, I mean, that acquisition rehab project would remain a first priority. The history about that, how we arrived at that is, I mean, housing authorities were, traditionally had the opportunity just to go directly to the treasurer and request private activity bonds direct. So as a matter of we acknowledging that as the collective system that is we under consideration, we still adopted some flexibility with that, and at least getting a name list so we could budget accordingly. But yes, they would still have priority. And then the second question in regards to just kind of advise priority wise, yeah, I mean, that's we're essentially now asking all of us to manage the soft gap money based on the PAB. So it's kind of gone, gone in reverse, even with state gap. There's, if there's an opportunity, I mean, really what it means is a a potentially longer, longer, longer hold time, and which unfortunately, affects the budget. But what we tried to do was work across and get at least recognition of that, and prioritizing local funding resources second, as a way to try to mitigate as best possible those longer hold times. But it's I mean, it's the system that we basically came up with. But we always, there's, we're eventually, if there's a federal fix, maybe, that in the subsequent years, maybe it becomes less competitive. And then we're, and we're also seeing, just as a result of the market, certain projects that we thought were going to be able to get to the finish are no longer, that might not be, make it to the finish. So that bar charts are information that we previously received, and now that's why the need to get an update on pipeline.
Yeah, so I just had, I guess now I have two questions, just pinging off a little bit of what Jill said. So if I understand correctly, then our local jurisdictions, if they have a NOFA out, they would need to then make a reservation of funds that is perhaps conditional on a receipt of 4% LITEX, I mean, and PAB. I mean, I think that that's kind of getting at what you were speaking to, Jill. So, yeah. So you maybe don't have an answer right now. I'll go back to some easier questions. I just had clarifying questions about, Angela, did you say that the amended QAP and the recommendations for the 9% swap will go to Housing Stability Council in January, or will they go in December with the expectation that it'll be a done deal in January, or to be determined?
Yeah, my slide is not fully up to date. So we are aiming for December with recommendations for the swap QAP implementation in January. The 9% swap is allowable in the current iteration of the QAP, which is how we're moving forward with that now.
Okay.
As a response to market factors.
Thanks, and I'm going to pass it to Shelley.
I'm piggybacking a little bit on that question. Those of us who have like an end of first quarter bond sale date on a 4, but we're proposing the 9% swap, do you have an idea after the 3rd when you're going to let us know so that we can transition? As you know, with RD, we need to be able to transition quickly. So if you're going to wait till December to approve, but if we know you're recommending, so that's kind of what I'm, so that we know if we have to keep our bond sale date or not.
Yeah, that's the answer. I mean, if we will do our best to try to get, as in advance of that December, in advance of December, it also kind of, if the flood, if there's a less, if it's light, then we will, it would be closer to, closer to November, hopefully closer to November. And the latest would be late November, because we go to house, published a packet and, all that, so, late October would be the early, really see the earliest, mid-November, ideally.
Christina Palacios, Unite Oregon. We're a nonprofit organization. I advocate for BIPOC community, and I have a big concern about how funds are going to be distributed. Like what you were saying, the one that has more likely going to be able to get those projects. Well, the BIPOC community has been pushed out to the outers, and those, like the city that I live, Troutdale, is the ones that have less resources. So how we're gonna build where communities at?
Thank you for the question. I think we've done our best in the current iteration of the QAP to elevate the need of BIPOC communities, both by implementing a 9% set aside, and we'll talk more about that in the second half of the session, and also by implementing some equity and racial justice measures that include important partnerships with service to communities of color, as well as the requirement to utilize businesses that are operated by minorities, women, and emerging small businesses. I think you bring up a good point about how are we equitably distributing? And I think that's a larger conversation for folks that stick around for the second half about the 9%. That's definitely a part of our lessons learned from this last cycle, and perhaps we can delve in more there. I do want to just answer the question. We've got a question online about if the 4%, 9% swap affects the amount offered in 2023, and it completely does. If there are remaining 2024 credits, they would be offered in September of next year, the remainder of those 2024 tax credits. If there are not, then there will not be an offering.
Well, we still have more to talk about, so we'll do we want? Okay, go ahead.
On the traditionally with some of the soft funding sources from Oregon Housing, they've been mashed with the 4% to complete the funding stack. When you look at some of those soft funding sources, will they now prioritize those projects that aren't utilizing 4% first? Or how is that going to be structured from a financing perspective?
Well, I guess, could we go back to a couple of slides? Because let's skip back. 1, 2, there. Oh, no, yep. So we're still going to be prioritizing those state resources that are paired with 4%. Those are still going to be prioritized third. So yeah.
I guess assuming that maybe you don't have enough 4% or bond cap to flow to that third priority, or it's limited at that third priority, so it's not fully available for projects being funded with soft funds.
So I think important to, and I will acknowledge that all of those individual programs have their own program managers who are also pivoting with the change. I think we all know that the local innovative fast track funding was designed to really maximize the ability to use a 4% PAB. And I think we saw that in the last offering of LIFT, that there was a pivot where you were seeing an increase in subsidy sources, you were seeing LIFT only requests. And those program managers are busily at work and staying in communication with our team to make sure that we're being equally transparent internally with those other sources so that they can continue to structure those programs to successfully use those resources, even if they need to do so redefining their use.
All right, do you want to shift back? All right.
Last call for 4% questions. They're always welcome. Big shout out to Kim Travis, OHCS.
OHCS.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Okay, next slide, please. Actually, one pass, perfect. So the conversation is shifting some. So I know a lot of you were here. We're here for that conversation about 4% bond. We're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about the 9% offering. We had a very robust August Housing Stability Council with our project recommendations, so we didn't get an opportunity to really talk through what happened. And since I've got you all here, I'm excited to share. So we offered in February our 9% offering with approximately, and it closed May 6th. We fielded questions through our MF NOFA, which is a good red flag that those of you with 4% questions should be tracking those to your production analyst if you have one assigned, or to our ARH email. The MF NOFA isn't regularly checked, and so if it's taken a little while, please reach out to Ty or I directly if you've submitted questions here and have not gotten a response. All applications were screened according to that NOFA. I think as a second good red flag, the 4% moving forward won't have a NOFA, and so we're working on creating a set of procedures so that folks have some sense of how it is internally that we're moving through that process. Again, really aiming for as much transparency as possible. I could have next slide, please. Perfect. So for folks who may or may not be aware, there was 10 million in tax credits offered this last cycle. We have, based on the current QAP iteration, a preservation set aside, which is 25% of those resources, a 10% tribal land set aside, 65% is divided among geographic regions, which include metro, non-metro participating jurisdictions, so those areas or cities that have their own allocation of home, balance of state rural, urban, and balance of state urban, sorry. So essentially anything that is not in metro or does not have its own participating jurisdiction is split up. And then we have two cut across set aside. So one that is federally required, 10% for nonprofits, and a newly implemented cut across set aside, which is specific to our culturally specific projects that have sponsors who are culturally specific organizations. In addition to that, we offered our gap financing, home, Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credit, and some PSH rental and operating subsidy. Next slide, please. So in total, we received 19 applications with $32.3 million in requests for that 10 million available. We're seeing oversubscription everywhere. 16 of the projects were coming in through that regional set aside, and 3 projects through our preservation set aside. I think important to note here is that the asks are continuing to increase. I think we're seeing a lot more balance in terms of how much is being asked by set aside, and the costs are starting to equate. Just trying to get to that it costs us much, if not more, to build further out. And so the way our formula is divvying up that resource isn't always reflective of what's happening. And I think there's an opportunity in the long term, and we'll talk more about it, to really look at how we're looking at our set asides and if they're really getting projects cited in the places we want them. Next slide. So this is, again, I won't review this number for number, but it's just for folks to get a sense of how much is being requested by set aside, and then divvied up by which resources were being requested. Next slide. So for folks who may not be as familiar with our 9% process, there are 2 scoring options. You either come in as new construction or acquisition rehab or preservation. Those scoring are varied depending on the nature of the deal. Our new construction acquisition rehab scoring categories include state priorities, which are currently family-sized units, PSH, some location factors, which were also updated in our last update, partnerships, federal preferences, which are those mandated by code, funding efficiency, financial viability, and readiness to proceed measures. And as you can see, those are different on the preservation side because the projects are different, so we use different metrics. Next slide. So I think, and I'm happy to take questions or feedback. Principally, I think we're gearing to prepare for a longer term conversation with our sponsors and partners about set-asides. I think this has been a long time coming, but we saw it kind of at its face very clearly this last cycle with our inability to fund a project in a non-metro PJ. And I think the Housing Stability Council has been giving feedback over the number of years that the more we divide the pie, the more hoops we create for ourselves in citing projects in the places that need it most. And instead of digging deep, which I think we're prepared to do, and we hope that sponsors and partners are also, to dig deep and look at what other metrics can we use to divide up those resources geographically that isn't just, this part of the map versus that part of the map. I'm hopeful to start those conversations about our next, again, we're in an interim QAP update, making these changes for the 4% program, but I think there could be longer conversations for our next update, which is scheduled for 24, but will likely be pushed out to 25, given the amount of change that's happened in the program already. So putting that out there, so for folks to percolate on as you're conducting your business day to day, if you have insights on the ground, always happy to take one-on-ones and conversations with folks. Secondly, the need to rework our funding pass rules. This also got in the way of funding a project in the set aside. As some of you may know, and probably not those who don't read NOFAs for fun or to participate, our funding passes work at funding the highest ranking in a set aside and then pooling resources according to characteristics. So our balance of state, regions fund each other first before moving on to our last funding pass, which is that statewide. There currently isn't and we saw our culturally specific set aside kind of neglected and not having the level of influence we were hoping it would have because of the level of asks we were seeing. And I think right now the formula for 9% is really calibrated at a LIHTC 9 ask a lot lower than CAP, which is that 2 million in credits, which many would advocate is not enough anymore either. But if it's not enough and we're not getting more, then how do we continue to stretch those resources? And so this will also be a continuing conversation as we move forward with a larger QAP update, is looking at how can we rework those funding passes so that perhaps resources are diverted to the highest ranking project in a set aside regardless of set aside. We're thinking through those and would be happy to take feedback as folks are percolating on it, perhaps after this session. Next slide, please. So we're also looking at potential administrative updates that would help unpack the application for review. With 19 applications, with approximately 30 plus supplementals requested, it takes us a good long while to really move through reviewing each of those items. So we're considering moving the financial review to threshold. This would give an opportunity for our underwriting staff, our production analysts, to take a look at the numbers and ask questions before they move on to competitive scoring. We are recognizing that the application is heavy and mistakes happen, and that right now there isn't an opportunity, for instance, for a 0 to be corrected without it first moving into competitive scoring, which disadvantages those smaller organizations who perhaps have one person doing the application and also their asset management and also wearing a number of hats. So that's under consideration. Additionally, I think we recognize that the webinar we offer in advance of those 9% cycles could be supplemented with some, as we've identified, there are folks who would like to participate in our NOFAs who are not as savvy. And so really breaking down some of the programmatic elements and requirements without kind of edging them out, as well as making sure that we address any practical changes in our application in that webinar, which I think we try to, but I think we could be better at identifying those changes and identifying things in advance using former cycles, FAQs as prompts. Next slide. So lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is the need, and happy to take volunteers who want to provide some more feedback to run an analysis on the balance of our scoring. I think right now the state has prioritized a number of things, and typically anything that doesn't get its own set of money comes to 9s for prioritization. And I think that's just been a cycle of the program, and it works, but it also has left the scoring unbalanced. And so one project characteristic can have disproportionate impact on the number of scoring categories that benefit. So we're looking at taking feedback about where folks are identifying that. I think we've definitely seen that with our PSH, our state priority scoring, which of course can give you rental subsidy scoring, can give you low AMI scoring, and really looking at how is one category feeding into another. And then of course, potentially implementing a rubric. We got a lot of feedback in our debriefs from sponsors this last cycle that it's not, that the LIHTC 9s are meant to be, a box. You either you're in it or you're not. You meet it or you don't. But unfortunately, there's still some gray area there, and that we could help make that clearer for folks in terms of what our expectation is in order to achieve those points by offering a rubric. How is it that the reviewers are going to be screening each of those components? Next. That's it. Yeah. Okay. So any last and/or final questions?
Also, just want to note, we are hiring. Just want to throw that out there. OHCS is hiring. Can work with great people like Angela and myself. Just throwing it out there. I know. If your staff, if it doesn't work out, well, I do understand you can always come apply with OHCS.
Can you go back one slide, please? Oh.
5 to be the higher position and lower position? Hello. Thank you. My question is, I'm trying to understand the the scoring of who gets the highest and who gets the lowest, and I think with the way I see things going, you can just name 1 to 5, 1 being the toppest and 5 being the lowest. But the nitty gritty behind it, that's the things I'm looking to hear. Does it make sense?
It does, and it is approximately 62 pages in our qualified allocation plan. If there's any component in particular, so I think a few slides back, I outlined those scoring categories, and that was state priorities, location factors. In our qualified allocation plan, it outlines what exactly we're looking for. So it's a percentage of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms in your projects. It's having participated in our Permanent Supportive Housing Institute, and it breaks down to approximately 78 components available. And so it's a little more than I was prepared to review today, but I am happy to take one-on-one and go through that with anyone who has an interest in it, so that, because really it is understanding those scoring components that makes you competitive. Anybody else? Any last questions? 4s or 9s? All right. Well then, thank you